Hi, everybody. It's Susan again. This time I'm here to talk about the Pisces new moon. And the reason that I'm doing it unusually early for myself, anyway, for my habits, is that I feel very strongly that we're entering already into the eclipse zone, as it were. And this lunation brings us to the next eclipse, which is the 14th of March, rather the full moon of the 14th of March. So it's part of this eclipse cycle. And this new moon is setting us up for that. But I think usually we feel the eclipse energy a good month before the eclipse, and certainly a month afterwards. So I wanted to give you a heads up to look at these events of now going forward. So I'm recording this on the 13th of February. So we're nearly 2 weeks out from this new moon in Pisces at 9 degrees, 40 minutes of Pisces. Just again, to let you know, I'm using the time in universal time. So that's at 1:45 in the morning on the 28th of February. So if you're in the United States, Canada, South America, this is going to be for you on the 27th of February. And anything to the east of, let's say, the UK is going to be on the 28th. And that's the universal time. It's overnight for many, many people. So that newness might be something that you want to start to think about the night before you go to bed. So when you go to bed on the 27th, for those of you going eastbound from the UK, then you might want to set an intention with reference not just to this lunation cycle, but also to the eclipse cycle of what you're ready to start again, starting over. It's kind of like a fresh reboot, because then when the eclipses happen in March, and especially at the end of March on the 29th, that eclipse, that new moon, is going to be in Aries, and that's very much about a new start. We'll talk about that in separate videos, but basically where Venus is at the time of this new moon on the 28th of February, she's at 10 degrees 45 minutes. She's only 5 arc minutes of a degree away from her station point. So she's moving very, very slowly at this point. That holds for pretty much this whole time that I'm speaking to you. She's only moving 2 or 3 degrees maximum between the middle of February and on into the 1st of March retrograde. And so this particular area of the chart, around 10, 11 degrees, but actually go back to 8, 9, 10, 11 degrees of your chart, even 12 degrees of Aries, or any cardinal sign, Aries, Cancer, Capricorn, Libra, that energy is going to be triggered quite strongly in a way that requires you to reflect on how things are going. And I'm going to describe that here. So as you're going forward over the next month, but even really kind of 2 months, 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks going forward from now, really take these things to heart and think about how they can apply to you and your situation. Because we're entering into this zone, you may have heard, we're entering into this zone collectively and individually of real transformation. And it's just really difficult to imagine how different the era is that we're moving away from compared to where we're moving into. And the energy of Pisces is always about the end of something. And then all of these lunations that we've had over the last few months have been at 9 degrees. For example, this one is sextiling the 30th of December, 9-degree Capricorn moon. It's in a semi-sextile to the 9-degree Aquarius new moon that was on the 29th of February. And then again, it's going to be 9 degrees at the 29th of March in Aries, and so on into Taurus. So when we start to reflect back over the last few months, we're also invited to reflect on how that has informed this moment in time and how we can start to move forward into the next few weeks as Venus retrogrades. So we're not just progressing cycle by cycle, but we're also in these bigger cycles of retrogradation. At the time of this new moon, now Mars will be direct, and that is what is ruling this Venus in the 10th. And the reason that I emphasize this Venus at this time is because this particular part of our chart, wherever that Aries, let's say within 8 to 12 degrees of Aries, maybe even 13 degrees, we give it 2 degrees on either side, we'll call it 8 to 13 degrees, is going to be influenced so strongly over the month of March and into April, really, really powerfully, even into May, actually, again, because that's going to be recalled by the 16th of May when Venus moves back to this point for one last time and then moves beyond it. So we're looking at an arc of time that is undergoing an enormous amount of change. And it's, for me, very intimate. It's very philosophical. It's very spiritual. And so it may not necessarily show up in material ways, although it kind of depends on your chart. It depends also on the area of the chart where this is happening for you. And of course, I'll talk about that in a minute. But think in terms of where you are in relationship. And because Venus is highlighted at this time, this is really strong, your quality of relationship. And in a separate video, I've already promised I will do a video on the Venus cycle through Aries. I'm going to do people who have their Venus in Aries or people who have their Venus in Pisces. I'm going to do a video for you about what it means to have your Venus return, which is usually a big deal, usually a day or two of something coming up. But this time it's a big deal because Venus is retrograding, and each 8 years cycle, it's retrograding in this area of your chart between Pisces and Aries. And at the very least, Aries going back over the last 16 and so on years. So again, if we come back to this moment in time, we're looking at something that's very strongly highlighting Pisces, but we always have to see Pisces as a dynamic axis between Pisces and Virgo. And of course, because we have the nodes also in Pisces, not just the new moon, but we also have the nodes there, we even more so have to think about what's going on in Virgo. And in fact, on the 14th of March, that's where the eclipse energy is going to be. So where Mercury is at this point is a degree away from where the eclipse will be on the 14th of March. Mercury rules the south node. Mercury is almost in opposition to the south node that it rules at this time. So it's a big part of this energy that we're in right now, about communication, about how we think about things, about thinking about things in a way that is much more inclusive or out of the box. It's Mercury in Pisces. From a much more abstract or universal way, it's not linear in the same way that Mercury is in Virgo. And that's why Mercury, when it's away from Virgo, doesn't operate the same way. It's considered to be in Pisces, to be in its exile, or in its both in its detriment and its fall, because it's exalted in Virgo, where things are very precise, very categorized, and very there's a lot of thinking around how one conducts oneself day to day. In Pisces, there's a flow. And this is really the theme of the moment. We need to learn how to flow. For some of you, that's going to be easier than for others. And yet that's the way through this. And another aspect of the Pisces dynamic compared to the Virgo dynamic, which wants to control things, wants to make things look a particular way, can't let go of certain things, especially to be able to forgive is not so easy for Virgo energy. It's an earth sign, and there's a particular sense of what things should be like. Things should be like this. It shouldn't be like this. Whereas the Piscean energy is it's like flowing water. It's about letting go, forgiveness. This is the sign of faith, hope, and charity. In Corinthians, in the Bible, you have this very beautiful passage about faith, hope, and charity being the most important of all. And charity is an old-fashioned word that means love, basically. The other Greater Than Jesus band, the Beatles, said, all we need is love. And that is literally, or was it all you need is love? All of us need love. And that's literally the message of this Piscean energy at its highest level. And it's all very much so, as the North Node and Neptune are very strongly connected for basically from January of this year all the way through April. It's just starting to fade at the beginning of April as Neptune moves into Aries. But it'll be in an orb of conjunction nonetheless through April. So this is a big time, hard to really overstate that. And it's a time for us to dig deep. So when things get messy outside, we have to go deeper inside. There's a lot of traumatizing stuff that people are aware of now that in other times, in other eras of our lifetimes, we wouldn't have known about. And now we're dealing with our own stuff, or at least trying to, and we're trying to absorb what's going on around us. It is something we may not be aware of how much we absorb of the things around us that are going on. And to bring that to our awareness, we have to then do something about that. So one of the difficult aspects of this Pisces and Virgo axis is moving through this phase, or even for some people, a lifetime of victimization and feeling sacrificed, feeling martyred. And that is this kind of freeze response psychologically. It's like a freeze response. I can't do anything about this. Woe is me, poor me. This happened to me. Look at me. So that's the ego that wants to be special. That's the ego that wants to be recognized. And it is the lowest way of moving through life, because you're in a sense of incapacitation. And the missing element there is faith. As I just mentioned, faith, hope, charity. These are the three things that Pisces is strong in the sort of characterization of Pisces. It's very strong in that regard. That's what we're meant to be bringing ourselves towards: faith, hope, aspirational hope, not hopium, not the sense that I hope somebody will fix this. That's a different thing altogether, because it keeps us then back in the victim energy. Somebody else will take care of it. Somebody else has to do something about this. And you're basically waiting for your parents to show up. So this is something that we have to really reflect on individually, because we contribute to the group, we contribute to the atmosphere, to the consciousness that is the collective shared consciousness, which is again Pisces. And the way that we operate in the world is feeding into that. And if we don't shake off this feeling of injustice or unfairness or the victim consciousness, we will contribute to the destruction and the difficulties that people are, unconsciously creating all around us. And the judgment, the lack of forgiveness, the incapacity to move beyond what happened, creates elements of behavior that are dysfunctional. Like OCD is related to Virgo, for example. Anything that has to do with avoidance, that's workaholism and so on. It's like, what do I do to avoid? The Pisces is the checking out. Pisces is this is all too much. It's overwhelming. I'm just being sacrificed. I'll just sacrifice my life, my agency. I just can't. And then the Virgo is, how do I manifest that? How do I show up in my life with the energy of, I just can't, I'm not strong enough, I don't have enough faith, I don't believe, I just can't cope. And so the Virgo energy becomes the way that we manifest things in our day-to-day life, whether it be workaholism. For example, if I'm looking at a natal chart, when I want to find out how that person is coping with their obstacles, I look at the sixth house, which is the natural house of Virgo, because the sixth house is the house of obstacles. How do you manage that? How do you go through your day-to-day life? What's your attitude towards obstacles? What's your attitude towards things that are difficult? And that's a really interesting reflection right now, because there's no sugarcoating this. We're going through difficult times. But if you look at life from a bigger picture, there's something bigger than just us in this. Hopefully you've realized that by now. Certainly if you're following me, you might have an inkling of that. This life is not about you. It's not personal. You're personally engaging on the level of ego and identity and so on. Of course, that's how we have to do life. It's how we have to show up. But it's not about us. It's about a movement forward into a new reality, new things that we're learning, how we're moving through sharing. Are we contributing? Are we taking? This is the, let's say, the more healing way of living life, to recognize it's not personal. Life is not personal. And the more you can depersonalize that, which is again the Pisces, the less you feel a sense of stuckness, or the less you feel a sense of victimhood, because you're in this area, this domain of life that says, oh yeah, I'm one of so many multitudes. I'm a tiny speck of stardust amongst so much more stardust. That's not just on this earth, but through the whole of the universe. And this is why for some people it just becomes easier to check out, because then the mind starts to go click. I can't become aware enough. I can't hold enough capacity of awareness to imagine what it's like to be a part of this vast universe and to be insignificant. So the ego says, I can't do this, I check out. So we go to the wine bottle, or we go to sex or shopping or drugs or whatever. or TV or whatever the thing is, and we check out because we just can't cope. So we have to really be conscious in this moment. We have to raise this conscious awareness of how we are relating to life. So Venus is not just about relationship to each other. All of life is relationship. There's nothing that you're not relating to. You're relating to yourself first and foremost, or maybe you've checked out of doing that, but you still are relating to yourself. It'll show up one way or another. And you're relating to animal life around you, you're relating to your atmosphere, you're relating to the weather, your culture, etc. It's all about relationship. This is the Venusian exchange energy. It's what is it that is alive in me in terms of my connections with others? How do I relate? How do I connect? How do I manifest my desires for connection? And that's Venus. Currently, Venus is in Aries, and so there's a lot of attention on the self. What do I want? And there can be an impulsive drive to just get what I want. This is what I want. This is going to make me comfortable. This is the other Venusian thing is, how do I feel comfortable? The moon has that quality as well. What do I need to feel secure and comfortable? And if there's too much self in the equation, there's a selfishness. There's a sense that only I matter and I want to get this thing. And this is where the Venus retrograde that we're coming upon very quickly, 2 days after this new moon, that Venus retrograde is going, sorry, 1 day even, because I keep forgetting February. It's not a leap year. It's 28 days. That's it. That's the end of February. So the 1st of March to the 2nd of March is when Venus is stationing. So we're 1 day away from this Venus station. And that is where we want to understand where my desires are serving me or not, and where my, let's say, perhaps potentially manipulative way of being in relationship, because let's face it, Mars in Aries, Venus in a Mars ruled sign, which is Aries. Mars is strategic. It's about how do I get this thing? How do I achieve that? That's why it doesn't blend so easily with Venus. And I'll put a separate video up about that. But the strategizing is usually for gain, of course. It's an egoic gain or a sense of what do I need? How do I want to get it? But that's going to be questioned over this cycle of the Venus retrograde. And again, I did another video about the Venus retrograde cycle. You'll find that on my channel. But look back in time, look back to 2017, March, April, and go back to 2009 again, sort of March, April, and then 2001, just really April at that stage. What's the other date? 1993. Go back again, April. If you're old enough, you can keep going back to 1985, 1977, and look at this period of the year and notice that that's repeating in your chart. And so there's something here that you need to learn about how you're bringing potentially too much of yourself into the relational equation, or perhaps depending on your nature, on your chart, on yourself, not enough of yourself, and you're letting yourself down. So either way, you're letting yourself down, because if you're bringing too much of yourself, you're sabotaging relationship. Mars is about division and separation and individuality, especially in Aries. It's the most masculine energy of the zodiac. The directness of Mars. It's I want this thing. And then when you put Venus there, there can be a tendency to forget that there are other people involved, or that there's another dynamic that requires a little more subtlety. So the Venus retrograde is kind of like pulling you up by the bootstraps, or pulling yourself up by the bootstraps and saying, no, this doesn't work. Notice where it doesn't work and take responsibility. Again, that comes back to the Venus now coming back to this retrograde point, by the way, which will be the Mercury of this new moon, which is also the point at which the eclipse of the 14th of February at the full moon eclipse, the lunar eclipse of Virgo, is going to be. So this moment in time at the Pisces new moon, but really start looking at it right now, whenever you see this video, this is really about how do I choose this action based on this sense of preference and what is good for me. And again, remembering Venus in Pisces is exalted. It's going to be a qualitatively different energy of relationship, but is that the energy of, look at me, I deserve special treatment because I've suffered in my life. So there's a brilliant story in Buddhism about the a woman in the time of the Buddha, when he was still alive, a woman from the village came to see him and said, "I've lost my son and I'm devastated. It's absolutely unbearable. I'm suffering so much, and I don't understand how you can overcome this suffering. And I need some teaching. I need some guidance from you." And so the Buddha said, "Okay, I'll give you that teaching. I'll give you that guidance. But before you get that guidance, I need you to go to every household in the village, and I want you to ask them for one mustard seed. And you find the mustard seed only from the houses where they have not experienced loss, where they've not experienced death in the family." So she went from door to door and said, "Have you experienced loss in the family? If you haven't, please give me a mustard seed. I have to take it to the Buddha." And everybody said, "No, no, no. We've lost so many people. We've lost children. We've lost aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, parents." And she couldn't find anyone who could give her a mustard seed. So she went back to the Buddha and she said, "I understand. I understand now. This notion of I'm somehow unique and special, and therefore I get to be the victim. This is an identification with self that is actually harmful. And in Pisces, we are in the highest aspiration of Pisces. We need to let go of the ego identification. Again, we're in this cycle through this year, 2025, of the nine, the numerological nine. And numerology is very interesting. It goes from the number one to the number nine, and then it recycles. It goes back to one after nine. Nine is a fantastic number. It's a very spiritual number. If you add 108, for example, that's nine. Again, meaning the unity of the one, the zero representing the all or the nothingness, which is both the same. The punyam or the shunya, it's the same. Emptiness, fullness, it's the same. And the eight, which is infinity, and that represents the nine, and it's all contained in the nine. But the nine also represents the ending of the cycle. It's the last part of the cycle. Any number you add to nine comes back to that same number, because the nine itself is just, it's like, okay, I'm disappearing. I'm checking out. You can try that if you keep working through reduction of numbers, which is how you get to the numerological numbers. It's always going to reduce to the number that you started with when there's a nine involved. Anyway, just for the petite histoire. And so for the nine, we're also in this lunar cycle of nines. So within the bigger cycle of 2025, which is a 9-year, we're in the lunar cycles of the 9-year, and that represents Mars. Mars is numerologically correlated to the number 9. And why that matters is because this is also part of this story of the year, of this moment in time, because not only is Mars also in its retrograde cycle, it's ruling Venus as she's in her retrograde cycle. And then later on in March, from the 15th of March, it's ruling Mercury, which is going to be in its retrograde cycle roughly from the same point again. And then that 29th of March lunation, still ruled by Mars. And that story of Mars is really about how we relate to our emotions, because Mars has been retrograding in Cancer since December 2024, beginning of December. And it's been in Cancer since September 2024, so September and October, until it moved into Leo, just in the early stages of Leo, got to 6 degrees of Leo. And this is where we're looking at this quality of how we relate emotionally, how we relate to our sense of our primeval need for security. Do we lash out? Do we overprotect? Do we repress? This is all of that Mars in Cancer energy. How do we manage that? And that will dictate how our relationships are through the Venus that's exposing herself now through the retrograde and saying, this is what your relationships are like. This is the Venus retrograde cycle, which shows you where you have made inappropriate assumptions or inappropriate connections with people. And that it requires a clean slate. By the end of the retrograde cycle, or let's say by the 16th of May, when Venus comes back to the place where she is roughly here at this new moon, which will literally be 5 arc minutes further down the road, meaning nothing, it is the understanding of, oh, that's what went wrong. That shouldn't have happened, and now I've learned. So go back in time, go back to these 8-year cycles and try and take down the lessons already now so you don't repeat them in the same way. Try and take it up a notch and depersonalize things, and notice where there's a selfish impulse that is actually going to end up causing problems in relationship. And that's something all the more so that we need to look at if there is a Venus natally in Aries. By the way, it's not, this is not to say there's something wrong with you. That's not at all what this is about. If you have a natal Venus in Aries, for example, my daughter has a natal Venus in Aries, and she also has Jupiter in Aries. It happens to be my 10th house. That's when I had my daughter. And so that big change of me in society, for example, I became a mother, change of social status in her chart. That's affecting her through me in my experience, as well as the experience I had with her father, where he was in this career expansion that was huge. At the time we were having our children, he was really focused on that. I was really focused on having our family, and I was also at the edge, at the tail end of working in these so-called big shot jobs, working for at the time the European Commission, and having moved away from all that and moved into starting my yoga teaching, like huge 180-degree kind of turnaround, and becoming a mother as a new identity, which was a big area of focus for me, but very different to my lawyer husband. Not to say that there was necessarily anything wrong with that, but it meant that we were both going our way, and that's the Venus and Aries energy. So the child that emerges through that energy is going to have this sense of, I need to go it my way in relationship, because that's the dynamic they were born into, right? So don't see it as a flaw. This is where we understand the importance of the planetary rulerships and the dignities behind them. Some astrologers don't like to use those notions of a planet in fall or in detriment because they think that it's a judgment on the person. It's not. It's just, how does that planet function in this person's life? It's knowing what are the ways that this planet functions in that person's life. And it's not abstract. It's not for nothing. Anyway, so that's a little astrological aside, little personal biological aside, but just to say, don't feel like, oh crap, there's something wrong with me. I'm totally selfish, self-absorbed if I have Venus in Aries. No, there's a need, evolutionary need for you to go your own way. And indeed for all of us, but the way that you go should be good for you, because remember, you're in relationship to yourself first and foremost. That's also the Aries energy, as well as being in relationship to others. And if you're not in a healthy relationship, either to yourself or to others, you don't feel good. This is Venus is also how we feel happy, what makes us feel satisfied and happy. So where am I going with all this? The point being that this new moon is really setting us up for a higher vision of our life. And we, because of the square, which is actually, can be a bit of a trap, a honey trap, as they say in the spy world, this can be a bit of a trap with Jupiter, who is ruling all of this Piscean energy in a square, or build, the square from the moon and sun is building. It's an approaching square, which means that is even more powerful, because a separating square has already done its business. It's moving on. It's understood and it's moving on. But when the square is building up, there's more dynamic energy. There's more energy behind it, let's say, that we're working towards. And the square from the sun and moon to Jupiter can be overindulgent or over positive or over arching, overreaching. We can take on too much. That can be the hopium, for example, but the square requires adjustment. And how do you get adjustment? You get it from Mars. You need to take action. Whenever you have something like a square or an opposition, you imagine yourself walking down the street and you're coming directly in the line of sight of somebody. Somebody has to move. So you have to take action to get around that opposition. You have to accommodate. In a square, imagine yourself coming from perpendicular streets and there's somebody coming at a 90-degree angle from you, and you have to also make an adjustment. Somebody needs to take action, even in a sextile, because it's not necessarily smooth sailing. It's easier, but you still have to take action. And so that energy of the sextile, for example, is coming from Uranus towards Mercury. which is about the needing to change our way of thinking or perhaps communicating, needing to change the way that we reflect on, the way that we contemplate, the way that we frame things. How do I frame my vision of my life? Am I a victim or do I have agency? If you have a hard time forgiving, for example, if you have a hard time letting go of past hurts, you may not be aware of it, but you're living as a victim. Because what you're saying is, you've done something to me and I'm suffering and I'll continue to suffer, and that's why I can't forgive you. And it's not at all to deny that bad things happen to people, but it requires a reframing of the story to say, you can move on from this. How do we move on in life? It's this Mars. So Mars in Cancer is saying there perhaps is something that you need to resolve with your parents. And this, again, is the kind of classic understanding, but it's true. Our parents are the first influence that we have on our life, but it's not to blame your parents. It's to understand. This is where in this week in our astrological course that we're doing about reading a natal chart, I'm going over with people how to see their parents in the chart. And it's a really important way of working with astrology. This is how I get so much clarity out of a chart, and people get clarity for their own experiences of life, because I'm looking at what's going on with their parents before they're even born and understanding this is what they're grappling with. They're not necessarily bad people. They're just trying to make sense of this life. Maybe they were 18 years old and suddenly they're pregnant. What the hell? And so you have to build that understanding into your frame of reference so that you don't go through all of your life saying, my parents were bad parents. We are partly our parents. There's 50% of us, at least, that is our direct parents, and then the rest is our other ancestors. You can break that down any way you like, but we have to make peace with this. We have to overcome, not to say this didn't happen, I'm going to pretend it didn't happen. That's bypassing, but it's to say, I understand that happened. It's a part of my life. It's a part of my history. And I'm living my life on my terms. And this again comes to the Venus, comes to this place of what is it that I want out of my life? Interestingly, we also have Chiron, which is again requiring an adjustment, where there's a basic pattern of a square between Saturn and Chiron, which is also, by the way, Mars and Chiron, which is also ruled by Mars. And that's holding for much of February and much of March, that square. So it continues, it travels with us in the next few weeks. And that dynamic is also about overcoming what my emotional frustrations might be, or how I'm not expressing my emotions, or how I'm not processing what I really feel, or how I need to take care of myself, waiting around for somebody to fix me, waiting around for my parents to show up, waiting around for somebody else to resolve my problems, is the victim pattern. And the Chiron in square to Mars is saying, wait, you have to change your way of seeing yourself. Chiron in Aries, where you may have doubted yourself, you may have even been told you were useless, inadequate, etc. But you need to change that pattern. That's that square. What are you going to do about it? This is the moment in time where we can't afford to be living as victims. There may be circumstances in our lives out in the world that literally victimize ourselves. We end up with areas of suffering because of what other people are doing. This is beyond our control. So what we can control is how we think about that. That's this component which is going to be again and again and again over the next 2 or 3 months, that area where Mercury is right now. This is the area of our life that is going to be showing up in terms of how we think about all of this, how we communicate about it, what choices are we making around this. The other thing that's happening very strongly through February and March is that there's this really powerful trine from Mars to Saturn. That's real determination. It's a harmonious aspect between the two fighters of obstacles, let's say overcomers of obstacles, where you get to this place where you have courage and you also have determination. And Saturn in Pisces, when it's not used correctly, when there's no clarity of structure, when there's no clarity of purpose or higher meaning, it feels like life can be too hard. The way to resolve that is Saturnian. It means take responsibility. It's be the adult in the room. If you didn't have one when you were growing up, you are now an adult. So you have to be that adult. And going through the process of healing that may require several different types of therapy, or may require several different ways of looking at your life that can be very uncomfortable, because we have to also acknowledge our role in where we are in this moment. And recognizing the choice and then acting upon that choice is the trine there between Mars and Saturn. So really, that's very encouraging. I see this whole moment in time as a big open possibility. It also happens to correspond to my own Pisces stellium. So again, like I said, for some people, this is easier than for others. If you have a heavy fixed chart, it is in your psychological nature to resist change. It's something we have to get familiar with, because change is the only constant. It's just the composition of life is about change. Just in this point of the video, if you've been listening from the beginning, already trillions of cells in your body have completely transformed. And this is the nature of change. It's just that it feels slow when we look at things from the material perspective. Things don't seem to change as quickly. But I can promise you things are changing really, really fast, constantly. And then the more attention you put on the present moment and on the reality of the situation, meaning the cosmic reality of the situation, which again is Pisces, where the North Node is calling us basically until July 2026. All of our attention is here on this notion of what is the truth of life, the capital T truth, which is the cosmic strata and substrata that we're actually living through. So the more that you can come to this place of higher understanding, participating in your life actively, questioning where am I falling into the victim and martyr pattern, it is something to really acknowledge, because this is where the healing happens. That dynamic between Pisces and Virgo is the healing axis. And the physical healing is accompanied by spiritual and psychological healing. And the two have to go hand in hand. You can't do the one without affecting the other. And ideally, both are done simultaneously, like working through trauma, for example, working both on the level of the body, moving through pain or stress or trauma in the body, and also talking it out and trying to understand, make sense of it. But doing one without the other leaves part of the work undone. So yeah, this notion of faith, this notion of a higher vision for life. Why am I here? Why was I born? What is life all about? It has to come from a place of there's a bigger picture here that I may not have fully understood. And I have to build this trust and faith. I build it through forgiveness, first maybe for yourself, in terms of how you might have harmed yourself or others because of ignorance, because of forgetting who we are. And then recognizing also this next breath, this moment, is where it changes. There's a beautiful practice also in Buddhism, this time in Tibetan Buddhism, which is called Tonglen. And Tonglen is where you inhale something challenging and you exhale almost like a remedy. So it's not, when you inhale, it's not like you're inhaling to retain, but you're inhaling to transmute. You're pulling it in and letting it out. It's basically the whole process of life. It's like compost. You're taking in the thing that you don't want and you make flowers, or you make your vegetables. And so in this case, for example, you could take, say, a breath in, and you say, inhaling, I absorb, or I inhale anger, and I exhale peace. And this is not, again, you're not taking in the anger, you're not absorbing it and holding it and sticking with it. You're taking it through you like you're a channel. This is the Piscean energy. Again, you have to be a clear channel. You have to drop this egoic notion of self. You have to drop the sense that I am separate and different and not affected or not affecting the rest of the world. But if you do that, again, inhaling anxiety, I exhale tranquility. Inhaling hate, I exhale love. And you have to really get to the place where you mean it, because it doesn't matter. Saying these words doesn't matter. If you still identify politicians or other human beings who you hate, then you're not able to live a spiritual life. You're not able to live in love, because part of you is holding on, part of you cannot forgive, part of you is resenting. You have to get to the place where you have such a depth of understanding that you understand your enemy You see? But we're trained in the opposite. We're trained to hate on the level of society, especially in some countries. There's a deliberate provocation, a deliberate propaganda training you to hate, I don't know, Vladimir Putin. If you dare say that something might be incorrect in terms of the way that geopolitics is happening, you must be a Putin lover and you hate us. Or the reverse, you have to hate Putin, otherwise you're not a good XYZ NATO member. You see, this is a form of insanity, and those are the toxic emotions that the Buddha was talking about, that the yogis were talking about, that Christ was talking about, and that Moses and Abraham was talking about. All religions talk about this. The quality of love and the transmutation of difficult emotions, difficult experience, it has to take place. Virgo represents digestion. When you're not in a good place emotionally, your digestion is completely messed up. When you can't stand something, it has to go, you need it to leave you, you'll have diarrhea. When you are resisting something, when you can't let go, when you're trying to control everything, you're going to have constipation. Your stomach will go into a flurry of overactivity. You might vomit when you're anxious or upset about something, when you're really worried about something. You might, just not be able to digest fully, or you have to evacuate. You have to vomit when something just is, I cannot stand this situation. I reject it. And so this is important to know that we're these multifaceted creatures. We're not just this personality, this idea of this self, and then incidentally all these things take place. It's that we are always like a hologram in creation. We're creating ourselves again and again and again with every thought. And again, I come back to this point, this 24-25 degree point of Pisces. That's where Venus will come back, and she will station direct on the 13th of April. That Mercury will come back. This is where the maybe I'll pull up that chart really quickly here. The eclipse that we're getting on the 14th, it's almost at that 24-degree point. This is where the sun and then Saturn really close by is going to be affecting just where that Mercury is. And then Mercury in turn is where the Venus was, and that's also where the eclipse is going to be on the 29th. So this is the time where we're getting information already. We're getting it. We're getting everything we need to know to prepare ourselves for the next few weeks, and in fact, longer cycles, big, long cycles. The Venus cycle, 8 years, for example. There's something big happening. And it's very, very difficult to overstate how important this is in terms of our evolution. Like I said earlier, we cannot control. The Virgo tendency is to control and to make it predictable. Let me know what is going to happen. I hear this in the comments all the time. Is this good or bad for me? This is beyond good or bad. It's how do I learn through this? And that, is it good or bad for me? That's the victim consciousness that says, I have no control over my life. I have no agency. I have no way of coping with this. Just tell me, is this going to be okay? That's the 4-year-old in you that needs to know, is this going to be okay? Heal that. Like I said, the Pisces-Virgo axis is the axis of healing. This is the moment. Healing has to happen on a deep, 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 deep level. And in terms of the spirit, on the vastest, biggest cosmic level that we can access, wherever we are now. We have to get away from this sense that life is happening to us and start to participate in it. And then we get to this place where whatever happens, we know this has served a higher purpose. It has served a purpose in an evolutionary sense, in the sense of how am I moving forward in this universe, in this human form, in this human life. If you just take this fragment of life and you say, well, it's like traveling around the world, like I'm going from this place to that place. It's me going, I'm changing my environment all the time. You think of that happening in a cosmic level. I'm just traveling here. I'm a tourist on Earth. I'm just, the backpacker, that beautiful book. What is it? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I love that book. Now read it if you don't know it. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and to understand the profundity of the reality of life, which is the salvation. It's not about a person saving you. There's no person that's out there that is going to save you. Christ represents consciousness. It's not a person. There was a person. Yahweh was a person. That was the message. So it's not him coming to save you. It is the consciousness. And when you are reborn, when you come back to this awakening, to this consciousness that you already are, you're saved. And this is the message of all religion. Doesn't matter, or at least the origin of all religion. Religion starts to become political, and that's where everything goes messy. But the point being, in this very long sermon, which is turning out to be a sermon, I have a ninth house stellium in Pisces. It's about understanding why I'm here in a bigger sense. It's not the little me, not me. Why am I here? Why is life happening this way? Why am I being influenced in this way? No, it's like, why am I here? This is amazing. What an amazing experience to learn about. So Pisces is about detachment, letting go. How can I move beyond? And the more that you can feel that, the more that you will be able to really grow through this time. On the outside, looks very, very turbulent. And if you go deep, really profound, really deep, by the way, that Jupiter also representing knowledge, wisdom, understanding, faith, and to represent the notion of being able to change rapidly. That's also the mutable aspect of Gemini. I can change my way of thinking. I can open up my mind. That's Jupiter and Gemini. I have a wide open mind. I'm available to all kinds of input and information. And then in this square to the new moon, I know I need to take action on that now. There's something really, really big happening in this time. And it's hard, again, to overstate that. Right, so let me go sign by sign. So first I'm going to have to go a little bit backwards, because to get to Aries without losing our moon, I have to, no, hang on. I want to go forward first. For Aries and Taurus, I'm going to go forward, and for the rest, I have to go backwards. That's how that was. Just because of the degrees of the moon, I lose it otherwise. All right, so although Pisces is crowding everything out, we now have Aries on the ascendant, and this Pisces new moon for Aries, sun, moon, and ascendant is going to be in your 12th house. So it's really quite the specific meaning of these signs. In the Aries chart, there's something very pure. There's something very straightforward. It's very clear. With Aries, what you see is what you get. You have this lovely Venus in your first house, and you'll have her for a long time. You could have Venus in your first house until the 6th of June, back and forth. So again, on the 28th of March, she goes into your 12th house again till the 13th of April. But it's a long period of time that you are growing spiritually, Aries, and your quality of life is going to change because of all of this attention on the 12th house. There's maybe a lot of awareness of your spiritual life, or how you think about things, how you relate to what you are doing behind the veil, as it were, behind the eyes, how you relate to God, how you relate to spirit, whatever you want to identify that with, how you relate to faith. What have you got faith in? Equally understanding the role that your habit energy might have, because of course, like I said in the introduction, the axis here, which you manifest purely in your chart between Virgo and Pisces, is about the healing aspect of everyday stuff based on the everyday Virgo kind of quality. How do you feel? How does that manifest in terms of your spirit, your mind, your psychology, which is again part of that 12th house dynamic? Because you also have your ruler, Mars, in the 4th house of home and lineage and family. That can include your residence. Perhaps that's something to do with something very practical about where you want to live. There is an aspect also of ancestral connection that's really strong for Aries. The 12th house is ancestors. It's also how your ancestors or your family before you left an imprint on you that is unconscious. So you can start to notice that. You can start to see these things. How is that shaping up? And this is not just about this new moon, but it's also very strongly related to the cycle of the nodes, which is again a year and a half. So right through till July of 2026. So yeah, you want to recognize where you might be deluding yourself. Maybe there's something that you realize, now I need to change this. It might be a habit that's not good for you. The quality of, how you might be doing things behind the scenes, and you recognize that that's either working for you or not. That's another thing. It's a new way of being. And it might even be an invitation to become much more spiritually active, or really take charge, doing something actively about nourishing that aspect of yourself, that aspect of your life. As Jupiter is direct now, Mars is also direct at this time. there is this quality of recognizing patterns of thinking and emotion. So Mars is in your house of emotion, your psychological foundation, and Jupiter has been in your house also of your mind. Your how do I think about things? And it's ruling that 12th house. It rules your ninth house also of your faith and your religion or your spirit or your connection to all of that and your connection to higher, whether it be philosophical teachings or higher learning of all kinds. And that Jupiter in the third house is bringing more of an awareness to that. On a practical level, this can have something to do with family, especially if you have family overseas or family that is passing. If you're losing members of your family or if you're still dealing with grief and working through grief, this is also a time where you can find a deeper meaning to the loss. Uranus is also in your second house, which is connecting to the third house through the verb. How do I speak and think? How do I communicate things? The words that I choose, the values that I place on things. And so this can also contribute to this bigger healing journey that you're on. And you have been on this very big healing journey. You've been highly impacted by the nodal axis for the year and a half up till January. And you've had Chiron in your first house about healing the self since 2018, since May 2018. Right. So a beautiful time, I think, for Aries to really wake up to themselves, to their spirit. Good luck with that, Aries. Oops, we didn't want that. We wanted this. There we go. Taurus. Right. So this is happening in your 11th house, which is a lovely way of envisaging your future, having a sense of what do I hope for? This is, as I mentioned, this is part of the Piscean quality is the faith, hope, and charity. So where can I be charitable? Where can I be in that space of abundance? So you've got Jupiter in your second house, ruling the 11th. So really recognizing where abundance is in your life. And, you know, the smaller, the egoic sense of lack will always say, well, I don't have a lot of money. I'm not abundant. So you have to look at abundance in a much bigger way. If you constantly look at the notion of abundance from the material world, you will only find lack. You can be a billionaire and find lack, you know, and we see that. We see these billionaires just chasing after more and more power, more and more money, more and more stuff, because they don't see where abundance is. They don't understand really what abundance is. So this is an opportunity for you to really learn what is abundance. How does that affect my vision for life, the way that I foresee or hope for my future? How do I connect socially? How do I connect in a way that allows me to be connected to the people that matter to me? You could describe that as your community, your tribe, your sense of how you participate in all of that. All the more so because Mars has been in your third house of local community, local space, your connection through how you communicate stuff. And there's probably been quite a lot of dynamic change around that as well. Since Mars was there since September 2024. And this is certainly where a lot of your attention needs to go. And we also have the Venus in your 12th house. So part of those relations, the relationship energy that is from your ruler, Venus being in your 12th, is where you want to recognize that your relationships, either in the way that they take shape or the way they transform you or the way that they affect you, may not be good, or there may be individuals in your life that are not helpful, because that 12th house is also the house of hidden enemies and self-undoing, meaning that can include yourself. The things that you're doing, overindulgence can be there, for example, with Venus in the 12th, a certain amount of selfishness, or, you know, a need to become aware of how relationships are affecting you overall. And that will show up through the retrograde cycle as Venus goes back and forth through the 12th to the 11th and back. And then into your first house, which is lovely, because having your ruler, Venus, in your first house, starting on the 6th of June, is going to be really, really special. That happens every year, but it's still very special, your ruler. So yeah, a big time, really big time for you to experience. Now, on a material level, there can be gains, there can be financial gains. Jupiter is now moving direct. Mercury, which is ruling Jupiter, is not necessarily in its happy place, but Mercury loves being in the 11th house. And it's certainly highlighted because there's a lot of thought that's going into this moment in time, as Mercury also stations retrograde in the 12th and comes back into the 11th house. So how you negotiate things, how you, again, connect with people, what friends are there for you, what friends are not there for you, who should not be there. You've got Saturn there that's also been cleaning house in that sense. making things much more lasting, long-term, more serious in that sense. If it's around money, how do I make money perhaps from a different way of being, not from the mainstream, not from the classical way that everybody else has done, but how can I bring in something that's a little different, that more Piscean quality, which may be something about art or, some kind of, a little bit more far out, a little bit more of a marginal type of income, but doing so, or at least doing what you do in that new way, in that more higher-minded way, will bring you abundance. So if you're looking for that Jupiterian abundance, that's how you're going to get it. Right. So yeah, all the best for this moon, and I will see you in the next video. So we're now going to scoot backwards so we can get to Gemini, just because of the way the moon is. I just want to keep it in Pisces. Mostly for me, because otherwise I get confused. All right, so here we have Gemini on the ascendant, and we have this new moon happening in the 10th house. There's such a lot going on in the 10th house for Gemini. Now, again, the Santa Claus version is, oh, there's a lot going on in my 10th house. That means everything should be sunshine and roses. My career is going to be great. Everything's fabulous. No, it means there's a lot of you and your attention going into the 10th house that you need to reflect on. You need to think about this, especially as your ruler, Mercury, is going to be going back and forth from the 11th to the 10th. And we will speak about that in a separate video, but the short story, the brief version is that you're rethinking your future based on what you're doing in your career, based on how that's impacting you, based on your social status and how you reach out into the world. All of that is how that's going to be transpiring over the next 3 months, and particularly through the eclipses. So don't wait around for gifts to show up. When Jupiter is in the first house, you're able to reach out into the world in a new and dynamic way, in an expansive way. But again, it's not like somebody's going to come knocking on your door and saying, hey, look, Jupiter's in your first house, take all these nice things. You have the opportunity now, you have the agency, you need to use your agency to do something about it. Mars is in your second house. That's the house of your about your choice, your stuff, let's say, your access to money, to revenue, to your resources, including yourself. And that's where you are putting a lot of your attention as well in terms of your future. So you might need to be planning financially for the future, or maybe there's something to do with how you are interacting with your family, or even with food, because Mars in the second house, where Mars rules your sixth house, there can be something to do with food and how you eat. Are you dealing with your diet, with your choice of food and so on in a way that's healing to you? That can be another really strong dynamic here. Yeah, and you've got Uranus in your 12th house, so your whole perspective on your life through spirit or through your unconscious planning or unconscious ideas, unconscious motivation has changed quite dramatically since 2018. And that's a part of this bigger story, but now you're putting all of that out there. How do I reach out into the world? How do I now make this real, or make this last in the 10th house? Because soon that 10th house energy goes to the 11th house, which represents the house of gains and your social circle and the people that you do things with. So what you're aspiring to, your aims and your ambitions in your career, or maybe in terms of your family relationships with your parents or authority figures, all of that stuff is going to influence your 11th house very quickly between now and the next month, and then back and forth, and then finally a lot of the energy going back into Aries in May, and so April and May. And so you're preparing something to benefit you in the weeks ahead, and that requires action, because again, Mars is about action, how we're taking action. We're not sitting around waiting for gifts to land in our lap. We are taking action, you in this case, in your 11th house of your vision for your future, and the house of gains, perhaps financial or related to what you realize is not supporting you, and now you need to do something about it. The second house is what supports me. When Mars goes through there, you start to realize, I don't have enough support. I need more support. I've been doing all this on my own and it's not working. And then you start asking for help. And again, that's Mars ruling your sixth house of your everyday. So how do I change my everyday? How do I change my attitude to being of service or being in servitude, where I want to show up in a way that is better for me? Right. I think that's it there for Gemini. It's a good one. I mean, the potential is huge, but don't wait around for things to happen to you. If you're not in employment, be creative. This is the Gemini skill, the new ways of seeing things, very beautiful, dynamic thinking. Jupiter in Gemini has a million opportunities. It's that you have to ground them in something. And Jupiter in Gemini can have way too many plans that can't be fulfilled, and especially so when it's in a square to the sun and moon. So write them down and take action on the things that are most achievable now. Don't necessarily forget the rest. You can take care of them over time, but take action on something and think in terms of your own creativity as well. Your house of creativity and dynamism and your choice, your sense of willpower, how you use that, how you communicate that, that's ruled by the sun. So it's a part of your self-expression to be in that dynamic creativity, which is what makes Gemini famous for being Gemini. Saucy and creative and self-expressed and witty and so on. The sun rules your third house. So right, and there we have the sun at the top of the chart. So really make the most of this, Gemini, and I'll see you in the next video. Cancer, this is happening in your ninth house. And the ninth house is sometimes called the road to God. It's the spiritual part of your chart, but also with a sense of higher mind that could be philosophical or could be coming from a place of just knowing, having a bigger perspective on something that will serve your 10th house experience of life. So the ninth house wants to have an influence on the 10th house. The ninth house wants to put something out there. So all of this energy in your ninth house is expanding your vision for life in a big way, because that's where the North Node is as well at this time. The moon, your ruler, is now in a new cycle in the ninth house, and it's trinal to you, makes it very, very favorable to you. The ninth house is a very fortunate sign for Cancer because it's in a trine. So the ninth house to any sign is fortunate. It's a fortunate place to launch something new, especially around the time of this new moon, or to start to recognize patterns of behavior or understanding yourself in a bigger way. As I said through the introduction, do listen to the introduction where all of the context is. And so your ruler, the moon, is very much part of this whole bigger cycle because it's the moon that keeps triggering events. The moon is what is activating all of these different things that we are going to be going through. And the moon itself is all about the eclipse cycles. So that the dance between the earth, the sun, and the moon is what creates the nodal axis. And then we call that an eclipse. And so we have this eclipse coming up 2 weeks from the new moon in Pisces. And this is very much part of the cycle. That's why I'm putting this video out a little bit early. So Mars rules your 10th house, and Mars is currently in your first house. It also rules your 5th house of creativity, perhaps connecting you to entrepreneurship or to projects that you want to develop on a creative level, self-expressed level. That's your intellect as well, the 5th house, how you use it and how you're working with that. Now, clearly with Mars in your first house, you need to have access to all these things. It also can represent your children, the dynamic interplay with your children at this moment. And also, because Mars rules your 10th house, a lot of what you're doing, contemplating, thinking about, taking action on is going to contribute to your 10th house, your house of reputation, your house of your ambition, how you show up in the world, where there's so much action coming up in March. Of course, March and April together. I'm back again in May because Venus is going to be moving back through there in May. And that's also where we have Saturn and Neptune moving in. These are so many things happening that it's, the videos could go on for hours and hours, but let's try and simplify. So we've got this big activity in your 10th house, meaning how you show up when you step out your front door, how you reach out into life, into the world. How do people recognize you? And it's coming through how you're taking action based on yourself, how you're taking care of yourself, how you're understanding your relationship to family, your relationship to your emotions, your relationship to security, because that axis of Cancer Capricorn also has to do with security, mostly like emotional security and integrity, the axis of what do I do about that to create security, for example. What else is this? Yeah, and then of course Jupiter in your 12th house adds to the spiritual component here. So the Jupiter in the 12th can put you in touch with ancestors or with spirit guides or with people who are able to help you see things from a bigger perspective, a more mystical or a deeper perspective, particularly so because that Pluto is also moving into the eighth house, which represents not just the sort of the hidden or secret aspects of life or your family traumas, family challenges, but also occult studies and mystery school stuff. So all of this coming through from the 8th to the 12th can really help you with that ninth house movement towards faith, towards what you hope for, towards what you see as your purpose, because the ninth house represents also what meaning do we give to life, and how do we take action on that. So as that's moving between the ninth and the 10th, this can very strongly influence your way of showing up. It can strongly influence the way that you move into a career or into the career that you're working already in. Equally, because that third house, ninth house dynamic is really strong. You've got Mercury in the ninth house, Mercury ruling your third house of expression, communicating, teaching, writing, and so on. This is also where, it's not for nothing, for example, that I decided to teach my course at this time from January through March, because I have a moon and rising in Pisces. I have Jupiter in the 12th house, and I have this ninth house Pisces stellium. It's ideal if you're a teacher, especially if you're teaching something of a healing art or a spiritual art or something to do that is going to improve the lives of people, to advance them in some way. And it also has to do with publications, publishing. That can be, nowadays, publishing can be on YouTube, especially as we've got Uranus through the 11th house at the same time, changing who listens to you, who's the audience, how you communicate outwardly into society, how you even earn, because it's also the house of gains. Venus will be partly showing that as well. So the Venus in the 10th, retrograding back and forth, can also reflect your earnings. And then that axis can be also the old-fashioned publishing of a book, writing a book, etc. And I won't bore you with the details of my book, but still stuck a little bit on the legal issue of the copyright. So because I've been translating somebody's book, and unfortunately the author passed away 12 years ago, one Jupiter cycle ago. Her Jupiter is in my first house, connecting with my ascendant. I suspect that by the time Jupiter moves through to my ascendant in Cancer, this will be resolved, and I can actually be more open about my book and share it with you. So here we are. Good luck, Cancer. I'll see you in the next video. So Leo, this is happening in your 8th house. So a really wonderful opportunity to open up to your more mystical side, your metaphysical side, to understanding more deeply the patterns in your family, potentially your sun. Of course, the sun is your ruler for Leo, and the sun is in the 8th house from Leo. And that puts you in a place where you might find some awareness or secretive information that has come through the family, or that is coming through hidden mysteries of life in a more general sense. That might be psychological. It might be something to do with more mystical experience, access to the occult, access to things that are a little bit more off the charts. This can also have something to do with money or things that you share with others, including intimacy. So we have, for example, the moon as well as the sun there together in the new moon in your 8th house, moon representing your 12th house, where Mars is. So there may be some dynamic also around intimacy with somebody that is changing your life behind the scenes, changing your life in terms of, 12th house is also bed pleasures. So when Mars is there, it can also be an interesting time, and can also be very instructive. You've got Venus also all about relationship, ruled by that Mars, and she's trinal to you, meaning there's a lot of support there, and there's something that you can learn through that Venusian quality of how you impact others or how others impact you, and what meaning do you give that. This can also represent the relationship that you may have with your father. Venus, the 9th house represents father and father figures, teachers, priests, rabbis, imams, whatever. And that is ruling your 10th house. So that has an impact on how you show up in the world. So this Venus retrograde for Leo also will change the way that you see yourself in terms of your career. And maybe you are turning towards something that has to do with connecting with other people, whether that be through therapy, through healing work that might be psychological healing work or spiritual healing work, or, and of course, you're watching an astrology video, so that's probably already interesting to you. But not some of you might be a banker watching this stuff, like my brother, for example, or like chalk and cheese. But this quality of money, other people's money, managing other people's money, is really strong for you right now. This might be something that is also a part of your story. So whether it be through inheritance or money management of some other kind, or through your spouse, the ruler of your seventh is in your eighth house. So something that's connecting you to money that you gain from a business or marital partnership, it's affecting you, and it's coming through the house of gains. So there's a real opportunity, even in a 3D material way, to expand your abundance, expand your financial security. And again, the abundance coming from a deeper place than just cash in the bank, but also having this sense of what do I already have that I already want, wanting what I have, recognizing and acknowledging with gratitude all the stuff that I have, and then recognizing also what your family gave you, and how you can use that for good or bad to, in bringing it to consciousness, to even things that have been difficult through the family can be used in a way that brings you great benefit. Some of the most successful people in the world have gone through deep difficulties in childhood and early life, and it's not a barrier to success. So that's also where we have to change the story, which is the Mercury part that I've described quite a lot in the introduction to this. So you have a determination in this moment. Mars rules your house of your faith and your beliefs and your guiding philosophy of life. And it's in the 12th, which is about your spirit and how you connect to that. And it's in a trine to Saturn. And so finding this determination and this will is going to come from this place that is much more behind the eyes, coming much more from how you deal with life. How do you philosophize around life? How do you manage to understand life? What's the filter, let's say, through which you understand life? If you're on a more pragmatic level, if you're thinking about traveling or moving abroad, this is also a time where that will be highlighted, because that energy from the eighth house is also going to be moving into your ninth house. So there's a lot of activity in the ninth, which is faraway lands, foreigners, that 12th house, ninth house connections, about going away. It's about traveling with a purpose in the ninth house. The 12th house is about quite literally disappearing from the everyday life, whether it's going overseas or disappearing in a way that you retreat, or that you are taking a step back from active life for whatever reason, and hopefully not checking out in terms of a psychological or emotional checking out, numbing, or trying to numb through drugs or alcohol or other addictions. Right. So there's a lot there. I would need to see your natal chart to be able to speak more deeply about that, but go deep for Leo, go deep, because these houses, the 4th, 8th, and 12th houses, are the moksha houses. These are the psychological areas of life where you're free. You're freeing yourself by understanding the nature of the mind, right? These are mental placements in the sense of the psychological memory or the psychological behavior, the hidden behavior that is influencing us so strongly. So that when you think of the 12th house as hidden enemies, think of yourself first. How am I my own worst enemy? Don't point fingers of blame until you figured it out yourself. And that's where the Mars is giving you lots of courage, right? Okay, Leo, make the most of it. I'll see you in the next video. Oopsie. Oh, there we go. So Virgo. So this is, again, a very big cycle for both Pisces and Virgo, really important times for Virgo. You're shedding an enormous amount, and that's going to, at some points, challenge your sense of self, because you've got the South Node in your first house of identification and who am I and the self. And that's showing up in a way that needs to change. There's an aspect of yourself that you need to be letting go of, becoming perhaps less anxious or fretful or controlling, and trying to transform the way that you show up every day. Pluto, for example, in the 6th house is helping you with this, can really change the dynamic. And not to freak you out, Virgo, but if with Pluto going through the 6th house, if there are things that you're doing or there are unconscious patterns that are causing illness, Pluto will highlight that. They will, all the transits of Pluto to the 6th house there will show you where you're not in integrity, or where you're not taking care of your health, or where your behavior, your everyday habits, your psychological experience of life is actually causing you illness. So notice that. Um, and try to take that higher minded road where you really see that you are a holistic being, that everything that's occurring through your physical being is like a hologram, and that your internal spirit, your internal psychology is creating your physiology. You're creating yourself in every breath, in every thought, in every habit. So very, very important time for you, Virgo. And also that energy of relationship is going to be a very strong dynamic. So it's not just the relationship to others, but again, the relationship to self. And this is a big time where the relationships to others are a mirror. It's really like in your face, Virgo, what is going on in my relationship? Am I taking responsibility for my relationship, or am I taking too much responsibility for the other and trying to fix the other or make them in the image of my ideal partner? Or am I taking in somebody who is reinforcing my sense of me as the helper, me as the savior, me as the person who needs to fix you? And that dynamic between Pisces and Virgo is very strong as well. The savior complex, the healer complex, the let me fix you complex. And this is a great opportunity to see, is this relationship overwhelming me? Is it too much? Is this good for me? This will be a process of a year and a half with the North Node going through your seventh house, but it really kicks off in the first 4 or 5 months of 2025. So you're getting this front and center. Your planet, your ruling planet, Mercury, is highlighted too, and it's highlighting the point at which so many things are happening. For example, the eclipse that's happening on the 14th of March, which is in your first house, is going to impact this same point where your ruler is right now. So really start to look at these areas of your life where Pisces is, and especially for the Virgos already now, but through the eclipse. And I'll do a separate video about that. You really want to look at, say, 21 degrees right through till 26 degrees of Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius. I should have said that in the beginning, but those areas of life are going to be particularly strongly highlighted for Virgo right now in March. And then again, where you're going to find this highlighted energy is where Venus already is. And so Venus is going to be stationing retrograde really very close to where she is now at the time of this full moon, which is actually on the 28th. It's just that I'm moving the dial. So it's the 28th of February. For those Virgos who actually do take the time to read the details at the top of the chart. And so we have this energy in your eighth house of shared resources and what you get from others, the gains that you get from others, and how you relate intimately, how you are interacting with your, let's say, metaphysical life or your metaphysical desires. This can be about expanding your awareness of the occult, or what is really beyond the veil. Especially with Chiron there, you've probably already done a lot of reflecting on your psychological health. That's very good to use this energy there. If you're not really actively looking at that, then you can actually have been struggling with your psychological health. And this is an opportunity also to recognize that pattern, perhaps of not having taken responsibility for your well-being. And how can you do that? Because when Saturn moves into that eighth house at the end of May, 25th of May, you will, and also with Neptune going there, you'll benefit a lot by bringing your conscious awareness to unconscious programs, or including family inherited programs, family trauma, and really understanding that deeply. Mars is in your 11th house, and Mars is ruling all of that 8th house stuff. And it's also digging up a sense of what you want to achieve in your future, how you want to reach out into your future, how that feels to you, what you might want to achieve. Mars rules your 3rd house of your willpower and your aims in the short run, and what you want to do, how you want to manifest stuff, how you use your courage. And so here it's putting it out there in the society, in your vision for your future. And certainly because Jupiter is also in your 10th house of career, it is now moving direct at this time, and it's in a square to this moon. There's a relationship energy that might have a business quality to it. So the business relationships, partnership in business, dynamics around business, whether it be colleagues or clients, or colleagues in the sense of equals, not so much relationships with employees, for example, which would be more sixth house stuff. But also your intimate relationship, marital partner, for example, especially with the Venus there in the eighth, there may be some bigger questions around your, do we share the same values? For example, Venus is not in her favorite place in the ruled by Mars. She's not super comfortable. And she normally is ruling the second house for you, the house of values, and she rules your ninth house of higher principles and the philosophy of life. So she's kind of stuck also between her house of exaltation, or the sign of exaltation, which is your seventh house, and her sign of rulership, which is the ninth house, and her other sign of rulership, which is the seventh, which is the second, rather, in Libra, where there's a lot of relational quality around values. And so this could be something that is you're having to dig deep or recognize where you're not necessarily on the same page as your partner in terms of values, and how do you want to overcome that? How do you want to resolve that? Maybe there's nothing to resolve, but it's good to be aware that you're making a conscious choice to be in relationship, even if you're not necessarily sharing the same values. It doesn't mean that the other person is wrong. It just means you don't have the same template in terms of life, which is not always easy, but again, I'd have to see your natal chart to recognize if that's problematic, let's say, because like two different religions or two different political values or two different, it can cause tension in the relationship. That's kind of an underlying tension that we can end up using as kind of a weapon against the other. So that's important to understand. The Dutch have this saying, twee geloofden op een kussen, daar slaapt the devil tussen. It's something like that. I got it wrong. Probably the Dutch among you can put it in the comments. Basically, it means if there's two beliefs on one cushion, one pillow, the devil sleeps between them. That's an old belief. Of course, the Dutch were more sort of rigid around their religiosity, but it's important to recognize, because if you can bring that out and you can understand that, might be a cultural difference, but it could also be more internal, more of a personal difference. You can work through that. The eighth house is also therapy. It's also psychotherapy, especially with Pluto in the sixth. You can work towards a healing component of that. Right, Virgo, good luck with that. I'll see you in the next video. And Libra, so your ruler, Venus, is the star of this moment in time through February, March, April. She's really on show here, but it's at a distance from you. So there's a lot of your attention that is going towards how you relate and with whom. And this is emphasized as almost like a continuum from the last year and a half, where you had the nodal axis, the South Node moving through your house of self, and the North Node moving through your house of partnership, so that a lot of your focus has been, as it would be for a Libra, on your relational qualities and the relational dynamic. When your ruler is in the seventh house, sometimes we have to look at the unhelpful or let's say the less personally enhancing aspects of the way we relate, and to notice that where we either put too much of the other first, or where we are being selfish in relationship. And so it's both can be true, where we might be manipulating in relationship. Venus in the seventh, especially as the ruler, can be a bit tactical, a bit manipulative. So that's something to notice as well, because it's also going to show up again and again over the next few months. And it can be an awareness of why dynamics are not working out. And again, go through the 8-year cycle of Venus going back in time and see how that applied to you before. And then, of course, your everyday life, including, of course, your health specifically, is really impacted. So just like Aries, which is your alter ego, you have the 6th house, 12th house dynamic really strong in your chart. And that's also part of the Libra makeup, which is that dynamic that is quite strong of the victim savior, or the victim martyr, or the sense of giving up and letting others decide on your behalf. This can be very strong for the dynamic, depending on the chart, for the Libran energy. And there has been a lot of energy in your 6th house for quite some time, because Neptune has been there for a long time. Saturn has been there for now 2 years. And of course, this is where the new moon is. And now we have the North Node there for a year and a half. And we once again have Mercury, who speeds along through there quite often, but still it's adding to the impact. And so there's an aspect of this moment in time where you really want to look at your everyday life, look at how that's shaping up. And this is, again, something you've been looking at over time, but it's really an opportunity to bring it to a better place where you look at, like, is this the life I want to lead? Literally, is this the day-to-day schlepping that I'm willing to do and that I want to continue to do? Or do I need to make some changes? And what would that look like if I did? Now, Jupiter is supportive in this sense because it's trinal to you in your ninth house, bringing you quite a lot of vision, higher vision, the sense of more of a sense of purpose, understanding why you might feel you're here. Why do I want to, what's grabbing me right now in this moment of time? What's grabbing my attention? Where do I want to reach out and grab that brass ring of life? And Pluto is also trinal to you at this time in your house of self-expressions. We've got a lot of energy that's feeding you in terms of how you want to show up now in a new way. So this dynamic of the new moon is something of a bigger, it may feel like it's mundane, banal, it's the pedestrian stuff of the everyday, but it's huge because it underpins the quality of your life and the quality of your relationships. So there's a lot to look at here. Mars is in your 10th house, and that's also about your ambition and your sense of what you want to achieve, how you want to achieve it, how you want to leave a legacy, or your reputation. What's that all about? It's certainly tying in with your relationship house, the 7th house, as well as your money house, the 2nd house. The 2nd house is also family and the things that support you, all in all. And so the quality of Mars there in Cancer in the 10th is where you might need to forgive. Listen to the introduction here. Your parents or the influences of society, or how you feel about your role of having to be an authority figure. This is also one of the reasons, for example, that Libra as a sign is not super keen on taking authority, because depending on the quality of that Cancer house in the 10th house, it's not about taking authority, it's about being cared for, it's about nurturance, and Capricorn is about the authority. So it's not in the nature, let's say, of a Libra to be decisive and authoritative. It often can, that waffling or that hesitation can be because there's a weakness in the 10th house that says, I don't want to take responsibility, I don't want to show up in that way. Again, that's unique. It will be different to every chart, but I'm putting it out there because it's part of that scenario for Libra. And this would be an opportunity for you to say, well, where in my day-to-day life do I need to take responsibility? And the buck stops here, the new cycle begins, and there's something that will show up then very, very soon in terms of how my relationship dynamics shape up. And that, of course, is with reference to yourself as well as others. I think I said it all. And of course, you've got Uranus as well, going back and forth. Now going only forth in your 8th house of your unconscious. So there's a part of that, how you share things, how you cognate, how you are healing things that may have been coming through the family secrets, or other secrets that you are now ready to deal with. That's also ruled by Venus, which is your ruler. So something significant there that might be revealed coming in May, or that you already know, but that is going to be easier to deal with coming May through, June, 6th of June. Okay, good luck with that, Libra. I'll see you in the next video. And Scorpio, this is happening in a trine to you, which is lovely. It's in the 5th house of your creative self-expression, children, your whatever you create, whether it's literal or metaphysical, metaphorical. It's your babies of all kinds. It's your projects. It's your output in a way that describes you. It's expressing you. That also can be about your love relationships, your romantic relationships. And obviously there's something to do with creative projects. This is huge, huge, huge for you. Whether it be creative projects that bring you income, because now we have Jupiter here in the 8th as well, ruled by that Mercury, which is in the 5th, and some kind of spontaneity or something that is bringing out how you express yourself. why am I pointing to Saturn? Hang on, we'll leave Saturn for a minute. But so that Mercury is also contributing to that, a new way of seeing that, a new way of creating or expressing yourself, a new way of relating to your children, a new way of relating to yourself as an entrepreneur, for example, is going to contribute to this bigger sense of what you want overall and how you want it to feel. This is about what makes me happy. And how I express my happiness. How do I actually get that happiness? Through what activity do I get my happiness? So the fourth house is, what do I need to be happy? Pluto is going to excavate your life foundation and really show you where you might have been holding yourself back, or what needs to change psychologically or even materially to feel more secure. And because that axis of Scorpio Taurus is also about emotional security, more relational stuff, and especially the issue of trust and the issue of harmony and trust in relationship. So this is a bigger part of that overall dynamic, where you can really start to build on a higher vision for your love relationships, with Jupiter in the eighth, in the house of intimacy, the house of your shared resources, your house of intimacy on the level of psychological, emotional, and sexual intimacy. That is where you find a lot of support, and it's coming also potentially through the occult or through the metaphysical understanding of life, the mysteries of life, and how you're understanding that. And now Jupiter has completed its retrograde through there and is now moving forward. So the understanding you gained at this time, from the depth of understanding in this, let's say, the space from October 2024 until now, is supporting all of this fifth house stuff as well. Do listen to the introduction, because that is really talking also about any area of life where you're not really conscious, where you're not aware of where you might be playing a role of victim or martyr. And that is part of what creates this dynamic of jealousy and the lack of capacity to forgive. That Scorpio Taurus is, it's not an easy energy for forgiveness. It's part of the healing that is necessary, especially the Taurus and Virgo earth elements. The deep water of Scorpio, holding. It's time to let go. Don't hold grudges. Don't bear resentment. Don't just don't. For your sake, Venus is going to show you how your health is, how your everyday life is shaping up, how you're coping with the burdens or the expectations of day-to-day life. And that is going to be a part of the journey towards what you need to change. And that will influence your relationships in general, because she rules the house of relationship, but it will also influence your unconscious mind, or your sense of mental or spiritual health as well, because she rules your 12th as well. Your ruler, Mars, is in the 9th house of a sense of higher purpose, which is really nice. It's trinal to you, but that can be frustrating, because Mars is not necessarily able to act in a way that is as direct as you might like. Still, it's trinal to you and very helpful. So Mars in the 9th is like a spiritual warrior. So you want to come from this place of understanding your emotional nature, understanding where any repression of anger is going to impact your health. Mars rules your 6th house of health, as well as your 1st house of self, and your body, your appearance, and everything. So any unspoken resentment, all that stuff, clear the air. Find a good therapist. With Jupiter in the 8th, really, really good to do that, whether it be like marital counseling through that 8th house dynamic, or psychological or psychiatric counseling, or whatever, or spiritual counseling, whatever works for you, basically. Find your way through that. If there is anything that you find difficult to release, because it's toxic, it's poison. The saying is that anger is like drinking poison. How is it? Anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I think it's something like that. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I can't sometimes remember these things on the fly. All right, Scorpio, good luck with this. Either way, it's quite impactful, really beautiful energy. That 5th house energy is really very inspiring. So really dig deep. Sagittarius, this is happening in your fourth house of your home, as in perhaps residence or your place of living, as well as land and property, but also more your metaphorical or metaphysical home, your psychological home, your emotional home. It's what you realize you need to be happy. And this is a huge focus of attention right now in these months between January and, let's say, June. And certainly, well, let's say for sure till May. Nonetheless, it's a really big focus of time and attention, and you'll get it back. That focus is coming back again in the end of the year, October through the early part of 2026. You're going to come back to review all of this. So keep your attention on it and notice what you need. Really understand what you need to expand in terms of your vision for your psychological or emotional health, how you relate to your family, particularly, how do you relate to your place of origin, your land of origin, your people, your people in the bigger, deeper sense of your ancestral people. The relationship also to security, the idea of security for Sagittarius, there's a tendency to live like a backpacker. So you live life in this way that you're kind of going around. So the greater sense of security is to live like a turtle, where you have your home on your back. And that requires faith. And that's the fourth house, Pisces, that also is ruled by Jupiter, just like you are. And you want to have faith. So develop that faith that allows you to feel this ease and comfort and security. You're getting your security coming from a deep psychological place of, I'm okay. Life is okay. It is meant to be this way. Things are meant to be this way, and finding a deeper meaning to how you feel, deeper meaning to family connections, deeper meaning to whatever spirit means for you. You might find that this is a time that you want to focus on a new property, new home. There's lots of energy for Sagittarius around home, in the quite literal sense as well. And so there may be a desire to move, for example. Venus moving in and out of the fifth house also can show you where you might want to, how your relationship energy, how your relational quality, what you need, what your desires are, what feels like how you want to express your happiness is tied into home. So, or the feeling of security. So there may be some relationship dynamics also that show up in terms of how you love other people. And this is also why Sagittarius has that reputation of jumping around in relationship, because it's got, Mercury ruled Gemini on the house of relationship, but it's also got Aries on the house of love and romance. So it's like, hey, I like you, let's do this. And there's not a whole lot of planning or thought that goes into relationship for a Sag. So notice that too, because Venus retrograding can be very instructive in that sense. And that Venus is impacting your day-to-day, not only your health, but your day-to-day work, your day-to-day life. And also, of course, she also rules your 11th house of your future and your social group. So all of this impacts all of that dynamic. House of gains as well, the 11th house. So it might be part of how you earn money, what you're doing, how you're expressing that. That Venus in the fifth can be deeply creative, very inspirational. All that fire energy is very inspirational. And Uranus, anyway, is in your sixth house, changing your day-to-day life. And Venus is ruling that too, until Uranus leaves and moves into your seventh house on the 7th of July. It's getting to the end, so I'm starting to lose the plot now. So Mars is in your eighth house, and it's in this place of depth of feeling, maybe even a sense of overcoming or understanding secrets or things that were not really conscious in your awareness. And this is part of the retrograde cycle of this Mars, the bigger story, let's say, of the last few months, continuing right through till April, mid-April. So you have a lot of perhaps understanding around the role that psychology plays in your intimacy, emotional intimacy, and where that might be affecting you, and especially romantically, or how that's affecting your sense of happiness, how you express that, or how you create things. If it's about children, it might be quite literal, like how is this new pregnancy or this new baby affecting me emotionally, or how affecting my intimate life with my partner, for example. Depends on your chart, but it's entirely possible with this moment in time, obviously for anybody, but it's quite literal for Sag. Moving away from judgment, I mentioned this in the introduction. So that's one of the qualities of Sagittarius, is that there can be a sense of knowing it all or judging. And if that's impacting your relationship energy, if that's impacting your happiness, it's time to let that go. And it's important to feel the flow of things. Um, and this is anyway where the North Node is putting a lot of the attention. So it's about letting go of judgment, moving closer to understanding, trying to understand. And Mars in the eighth also can really grow in the depth of understanding your emotions, especially, but also maybe your family overall. All right. I think that's, oh yeah, and obviously Mars also rules your 12th, so it gets to that unconscious place with all of this energy in the fourth, and then Mars in the eighth, and then Mars ruling the 12th. There's some really big lessons here that can be so constructive for you to really understand what motivates me. Is it something I inherited, a pattern that I inherited from ancestors? Because the eighth house is not just financial inheritance, it's patterns that you inherit as well. And that's why it's important to try and understand your family's past, the secrets and things that may not be obvious, even if they're not really clear to you, knowing that that's still in operation. So this could be a great time to reveal all of that. Right. So well done, Sagittarius. You're on the road now to finding your home, like your shell on your back. And the paradox is that the bigger and more expansive you sense your home to be and your faith and support is the more secure you're going to find yourself. So actually, Sag will probably like that because it's all about expansion. Good luck, Sag. I'll see you in the next video. So Capricorn, this is happening in your third house. With a new moon in the third house, there's a whole new way of engaging in terms of your willpower or what your aims are, what you feel driven by. And this can be contractual as well, where you're engaging in some new exchange with somebody, which could be about learning or teaching, or a financial contractual relationship, something that's changing your everyday business. If there's something going on in business, Venus is ruling your fifth house, where we have Uranus, so that can be part of the dynamic of change around if you are an entrepreneur, and Pluto's in the second. So the issue of money is coming up and changing. Your relationship to money is changing, your relationship to your values as well. And that's also represented by Venus. Venus is in the fourth, so this might have something to do with your psychology or the way that you feel, how you feel secure. And certainly the dynamic around home and family as well, your family of origin or the family that you're in now that you've created. Those family dynamics are going to be something that changes, and even the location of where you live might be something that's changing. Venus rules your 10th house, so this could be related to work. For example, when Venus is retrograding in your fourth, go back over time, like go back to 2017, go back to 2009, go back to 2001 and 93, etc., where you look at, did Venus in retrograde actually change the dynamic around how my home and my work were influencing each other? Or was this about children, for example, and my everyday life? The third house where we have this new moon is also about your local space, your local community, your everyday life. So there can be something to look at in terms of how you relate to your community or the place of living or your engagement in all of that. There's a lot of engagement in all of that at the moment. How do you need to maybe communicate something in a new way? This is especially where we find that Mercury connection, again, repeating that degree point in your third house. Listen to the introduction so you can hear more about that. And that might be changing based on this influence that's supportive with the Uranus in the fifth around your relationship to children or to love or to your creative impulses and creative dynamics. Fifth house is also the intellect and understanding how to use that. And the third house is also related to learning and practical knowledge, practical use, communication, etc. Saturn, your ruler, of course, still in Pisces until the 25th of May, having been there already since the 23rd of March, 2023. So nearly 2 years of Pisces, Saturn in Pisces now. It's going to move quickly through this place. So your ruler, meaning kind of like an agent of yourself or the ambassador of Capricorn, is about communication right now. It's about the connection that you have with the people around you, your everyday contacts, your kind of coffee pals or your golf buddies or whatever. really important right now, and it relates to money because it also rules your second house. So income or what supports you in general. So you find some kind of support, or there's a need to acknowledge or become aware of what you need for support in terms of either engagements of contractual or some kind of exchange type relationship or dynamic, or using your willpower, planning, making things strategic. That Saturn in the third house in Pisces is coming with a bigger picture, coming with a higher vision for the third house engagement. Third house is also siblings. So there can be something about siblings here that, or extended family, that is taking a lot of your attention at this time, especially right now in the first few months of 2025. But it continues through with the North Node there in the third house, continues through till July 2026. But Saturn moves then into your house of home, family of origin, etc. So this maybe does recall that story. Mercury is ruling your ninth house as well as your sixth house of everyday work. And that Mercury is a big part of the story of the moment. And it's ruling Jupiter, which is now direct. Jupiter is ruling the third house. They're in this mutual generosity. They haven't squared at this point. They're no longer squaring. Jupiter is squaring the new moon. So there's something about your everyday work that is expanding, or your vision for your job, or the habits and the way that your life shapes up. Like, how do I want to live my life? Where do I see myself living? What is the quality of my life? There's a lot of work at this stage for Capricorn. So the Jupiter dynamic in the sixth house often brings a lot of busyness in work. And certainly there's an enormous amount of stuff going on in the third house, which represents a similar kind of busyness. It's the house of the mind as well. So it's, again, that mental aspect, how you exchange information, how you exchange ideas, how you exchange details of things, but also how you communicate verbally. So, and Mars, of course, in your seventh, Mars is your exaltation ruler. So it's usually strong for Capricorn. Mars in the seventh means that something needs to happen in the way that you negotiate with people or the way that you interact with people. There might be some kind of challenge in relationship, or tension in relationship, or a need to put more energy there, or you're getting people kind of in your face at this time. It might be the Mars in the seventh can be people kind of coming at you. This can be with reference to how you feel about things in general. The fourth house is ruled by Mars. Notice your emotional nature, notice your psychological nature. So, Capricorn is known also to be dry. It's not just because it's ruled by Saturn, but because Mars rules the fourth house. So there's this kind of directness about emotions. It's not like you're not sitting around contemplating your navel. It's just like, this is it, let me tell you how I feel and let's get this over with. Mars also rules your 11th. And so the 11th is about your associations with people. It's about your vision for the future. It's about your aims and your dreams for the future, but it's also about gains. So the Mars in the seventh can also represent something about new partnerships that can be constructive in the long run, going towards the future. Right, Capricorn, I think that's it. Well, there's a lot more to say, but then I'd need to see your chart, of course. So good luck, and I'll see you in the next video. So Aquarius, you're also ruled by Saturn, and I do use the traditional rulers, not the Uranian rulership. So you do you. If you want to look at Uranus as your ruler, you'll get a different perspective on this. But your ruler is in the second house, where all of the action is, and the new moon is right there. Saturn is going to be very, very strongly influenced by both Mercury, Venus, and the North Node, and soon also Neptune in the next couple of months. And this is building up to the eclipse cycle. So really focus on your values, really have a notion of your what your relationship is to abundance, what your relationship is to what you have at your fingertips, what are your resources, how do you feel supported, what do you need to ask for. That's also something that can be part of the dynamic with your relationship to family that has been changing with Uranus in the fourth house. Venus in the third house, where she's retrograding at this point, is also pointing to how you interact and communicate with people in a way that might need to be more focused or direct, or you might need to recognize where you might be too direct, too focused, because Mars ruling the third house can be, again, similar in the Capricornian sense. It's where the emotions are a little bit abrupt. The communication for Aquarius can be very direct and abrupt. That's where the reputation for being strongly opinionated comes from. Mars rules your third house of opinions and the way that you express them. Jupiter is in your fifth house, which is lovely. It's trinal to you. It's giving you a lot of a sense of vision or creative expression, a generosity of spirit, and a sense of maybe finding more joy, finding more pleasure. Hopefully that's your case. And it's ruling your second house. So there may be also in this moment a realization of just how abundant you are and the potential for that. Mars has been going back and forth in your sixth house and into your seventh and back now in the sixth house, where it's now direct at the time of this new moon. So there's a lot of your energy focusing on your health, your everyday habits and lifestyle, your day-to-day life and the quality of that, and also your work, maybe working with colleagues or employees or people who work for you. It could be your staff at home, for example, or it could be staff at work. Mars rules your 10th house and your third house. So there's a big change here that is with reference to how you see yourself out in the world, or the change that you're having to undergo is going to change the way that you show up in the world. That can involve difference in employment status or a difference in terms of the way that you're working. Are you the boss? Or were you the employee and now you're the foreman or the boss or the whatever, or the small business owner? You have good aptitude to run your own business, for example, with Mars ruling the 10th, Jupiter, where it is currently, especially in Gemini in the fifth, it's really good for commerce. Third house run by Mars, so you're really on target, and you're serious enough to stick with it with that Saturn rulership. And of course, then the elephant in the room, of course, is Pluto in your first house, and you are asked to step up in a different way. So perhaps part of this moment in time is realizing that your values, which is that second house, new moon, Pisces, all that Pisces energy, which is also incorporating the North Node until July 2026, is really requiring you to step up and change values, or to at least expand your sense of what's important to you and how you experience what abundance means, how you perceive your connection to what supports you, and find that faith, find the drive of faith. The 11th house is ruled by Jupiter as well for you. That's also your vision for the future. So there's a big vision for future, big connection to society that also is feeding back into the identity of an Aquarian, because the 11th house is ruled by Jupiter. So it's all about what is going on out in the world, what's going on socially, what's going on in the cosmos. That's the Aquarian energy. So again, these things are not random. It's not like somebody woke up one day and said, hey, Aquarius is like this. It's all relating to the houses and the signs on those houses. Right. Good luck with this, Aquarius. I think I've said it all, and I will now see you in another video. Pisces. You may have guessed it. This is all about you. A lot of things are about Pisces at this moment, so the world will just have to adjust. And so this is really the energy of the moment. It's about finding the flow, finding this way of being at peace with the flow, living through that expansive sense of self. Listen to everything I said in the introduction. It's absolutely applicable to Pisces. So I almost don't need to repeat myself, but I'll give you a really broad brush vision of this. And so you're really starting afresh in the sense of self, your identity, your sense of how do I act from that place of me and how I engage in life. Do I have faith in myself? And if not, where's that faith leaking? Let's say, what needs to change? What's the dynamic of the victim martyr energy, or the sense of self-sacrifice? Where do I put myself last when I need to put more of myself in what I do? And again, am I in a pity party for myself? Am I able to live my life in a dynamic way and take responsibility, so that I recognize I can live through spirit with the feeling of faith and trust in the greater scheme of things, and then bring that to everybody else, because that means how you're behaving is going to influence the people around you. That first house way of impacting the world. And if you're behaving as a victim, if you're behaving as someone who doesn't take responsibility, if you're behaving in a way that is fragile and wobbly and far too ungrounded, then everybody else has to take responsibility for you. And that's when people start to get fed up with Pisces. And so you want to behave in such a way that you are living, in a way, walking your talk. That's the Saturn going through the first house, Saturn in Pisces, walking your spiritual talk and saying, yes, this is true. This is, I do forgive. I know where I hold a grudge and I need to let go. I do understand the impact of forgiveness and love and charity and hope, as I said in the beginning, and let go of all of that baggage of heaviness. Let go of the idea that I'm there to rescue somebody. That's the Virgo on the seventh house. I'm not there to rescue other people. I'm not there to fix people. Even though I can transmute and absorb quite a lot, I also need to keep some for myself. Venus in the second house is going to show you the impact of your notion of abundance, or your notion of what's available. What are my resources? And that dynamic of the retrogradation is affecting you personally, because she keeps going back and forth between the first and the second house, basically from January through till the end of May. And so this dynamic cycle of Venus is going to be showing you what you need, what you feel you need as a resource, how you use your own skills as a resource. That's that Aries on the second house. It suggests for Pisces that you are your resource. In the same way that for Cancer with Leo ruling the second house, the sun, you are your resource. Your actions, the way that you behave, you are the resource. That's not to be diminished. But also, how do you take responsibility for how you use resources? Impulse spending, for example, Venus in Aries, or impulsive relationships or impulsive choices around any Venusian things around desire and preferences and so on, can cost you, or you might realize over time it was the wrong choice. The second house is your face as well. It's your food, your relationship to food. And so there may be something that you're learning around how you're taking care of your physical being, how it reflects, the health of the person reflects on the body, reflects on the face, reflects on your verb as well, how you're speaking. Chiron is also there, so that's been a longer story. Your relationship to money and value and your values is really very much happening at this time. Mars is in the fifth house of what you love, what brings you happiness, what brings you joy. This is about your children, potentially family in general, but children particularly, or lovers, or romance in general. The sense of what is beauty and romance can be there in the fifth house too. And that can be about how you express your creative potential. Venus rules your third house of art and skill and talent. So that's why Pisces also are creative types, because the Venusian energy on the third house is being expressed. And with Uranus there, it's being expressed in a different way. Jupiter, of course, your ruler, is in the fourth house. So there's something now, while Jupiter is moving forward, that may feel more grounded. It may be where you're finding the physical home. Where is home? How does that shape up? What do I need to do about home? Is also feeling like now there's a solution, or now there's something on the horizon that feels better, feels more comfortable. Pisces work really well when there are two visions of home. Like I have a summer house and a winter house, or I live in two countries, or I live through, two different dynamics in my day-to-day experience. And that's what it brings, a sense of the expansive quality that Pisces embraces. Also because Sagittarius is on the 10th, and so the way that Pisces expresses itself is also that expansive quality out there in the world. The higher-minded, higher vision of Sagittarius, the dynamic sort of exploration and potential that reaches out the front door, as it were. I think I'm going to stop there, Pisces, because lots of what I said in the introduction is really about you. So take it to heart, listen again, and I will see you in the next video. And if you do want a reading, for anybody who's made it this far, that's what I do. That's most of my work, is to work one-on-one with people. So I would love to see you for a reading. Bye for now.